everyone, welcome to GameGorgon. My name's Indigo.
And I'm Krug, and today we have a very special guest who has graciously given us their time so that we can ask him a couple questions. We have Owen from Paizo. How's it going, Owen?
Good. I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you for coming on. I know you've got quite a bit of deadlines coming up very soon.
The thing about the publishing business is that when you meet a deadline, that just means you're available to start working on the next deadline. There's always deadlines.
That's fair. So we're basically delaying the inevitable of another deadline.
Yeah, I actually was at Gamma, and I sat at the seminar for Starfinder, and it was just like, cool, we've got this coming out, and this coming out, and this coming out. I was like, whoo! All right. So let's just go right into it. How long have you been working for Paizo?
I will have been a staff employee 5 years next month, but I was a freelance writer for them for about 5 years before that. So I've been doing some sort of thing for Paizo for a decade or a little more.
Wow, that's a long time.
And then when you started with them, what was your position there?
I was originally hired to be the Pathfinder modules developer, but I only got one module done and under my belt before they decided what they really needed me to work on was the player companion line. So I did that for about 2.5 years, and then the Starfinder project came along, and I've got experience with several different D20 games, including being the co-writer for the Star Wars Saga Edition D20, and a lot of licensed properties. So I've got experience with a lot of different genres and ways to use the D20 rules, so it made sense for me to put on that team. I was one of the lead developers for the core rulebook, along with Rob McCreary, who's now our creative director, and then I'm now the design lead.
That was going to go into the next question, which is, what do you do now? But I mean, there you go.
I'm the design lead. That largely means that I do the same job as all the other developers, except that if we all disagree about whether a rule's broken or not, I break the tie.
That's kind of like a dream job. That's awesome. You're like the GM of GMs. When the GMs disagree, you're like, this is the way it is. I love that.
That's if it's a rules question, right? The creative director decides like what kind of thing we want in our universe. So like if I say, hey, I've got these balanced stats for Otyug player character races, Rob McCreary can say Starfinder is not going to have Otyug player races. And then it doesn't matter how good the rules are. The creative director decided not to do.
Well, speaking of rules, our first question is going to be about Starfinder Core. The question that kept coming up when we were kind of going through all of the Starfinder classes is that at 3rd level, everyone gets weapon specialization. No matter if you're a technomancer or if you're a mechanic, you already have like kind of background things, like at X level you get feats. Why at 3rd level is it a full-on written out, you get weapon specialization?
There are sort of overlapping reasons, and if I'd thought about it, I would have made a Venn diagram PowerPoint presentation for you. It breaks down to a combination of math and spotlight protection. Operatives, for example, don't automatically get it with heavy weapons, and envoys and technomancers don't automatically get it with long arms. Soldiers are automatically getting weapon specialization with heavy weapons and long arms and small arms and advanced melee weapons. We want soldiers to feel like they are the best at doing damage and soaking damage in a broad range of circumstances. We want Solarians to feel like they are the best at doing damage and soaking damage in melee and or when using their Solarian powers. So that is the spotlight of every class. If you are a soldier, you do not need to put any more investment into those weapon categories to be getting the most you can out of it. So that you can be spending all your feats, and of course you're getting bonus feats, on other utility things you can do in combat, or if you need to shore up your skill points, take skill focus, take skill synergy, you've got options. But if an envoy decides, hey, I've noticed long arms do more damage than small arms, so I'm going to start spending money on long arms, they're going to have to invest another feat in being able to weapon specialize with that long arm. So they are spending a resource that they are then not using to be good at something else. In order for a soldier and a Solarian, and for that matter, a exocortex mechanic, to remain at the front of the combat curve, we wanted to give them this built-in thing that, while it looks like it's the same for every class, what it actually applies to varies by class. The other reason is that even with the scaling damage we were doing, there's this weird thing where things start with a lot of stamina points and hit points at 1st level. The number of times you have to shoot something can change as you go up in levels. And we didn't want people, as their characters advanced, to feel like they were worse and worse and worse at combat because they had to shoot things more and more and more often. But we did want to have rules where you could take the monsters from Pathfinder and adapt them for use in Starfinder. So we sort of had this hard floor baseline of math that we had to go with. Those numbers had to work. So in order for characters to be able to have a curve that felt natural, and so that when you were at third level, even if I only had a first or second level weapon, I was still getting this advantage with those weapons. After a lot of playtesting and a lot of spreadsheets of mathematical calculations and a lot of things where we're saying, how many times should you have to shoot a space goblin of your level in order for it to die? We concluded that we just needed a damage boost, and third level was when it came in, and that was the way to make sure that there was not this opportunity cost. If this is something we want everyone to get so the math works, we want to hard code that into the classes. The difference between a technomancer and a soldier on weapon specialization is not when you get it, but what it applies to.
That was an amazing answer to that question. Like when somebody says that they were schooled, like I know how that feeling feels now.
We went through it how many episodes and we're just like, I don't get it. And we're like, it's probably a balance thing, but I don't get it. Well,
can you really quickly elaborate on what you mean by spotlight protection?
If you are playing a envoy and you think to yourself, I want my envoy to be better at fighting, we want to give you that opportunity. We don't want to say you are not allowed to be any better at fighting than the base of your class. But we don't want that to be so easy that the soldier tosses his hands up and says, well, you're now just as good at this as I am, and you didn't have to do anything, so you're now encroaching in the thing I'm good at. If you then want to go outside sort of that spotlight, that expectation of this is the thing that you're going to be good at, you can. But when you do that, you start sort of steering into someone else's lane. We want you to be expending resources that they don't have to, so they are then free to do something with their resources to make them specifically more interesting or able to do things. Whereas the stuff that is core to your class that you do, we want that to come very easily and very naturally.
So there always has to be an opportunity cost when you're about to step on another character's toes. Not necessarily preventing you from doing it, but it has to cost you something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to think of it as stepping on their toes. We did have a concept with my game group back in Norman, Oklahoma years and years ago called bigfooting. And bigfooting was when you, in fact, smashed all over what someone else was doing, right? Oh, you're playing someone that has an advanced melee weapon and is a knight, and I'm going to make a character who's got a bigger advanced melee weapon and is more knight-like. That would be stepping on someone's toes. The more people are good at combat, the faster the combat goes, the less resources the whole group uses. That's great. Some of that, as you said, that opportunity cost. You're making choices to do that, which then means you're not doing something else. To be as good as the soldier is at the base.
Okay, I like it.
That's awesome. So the next question I actually pulled from Reddit, and this is a request that I've been seeing quite a bit. Is there any plans to reprint the core rulebook as a pocket edition?
So one of the things that we try not to do when we're in the development pit is release secrets of the company that say the publisher who sends their paychecks might not want us to get out. So there are no there are no announced plans, right?
Yeah.
I genuinely don't know if we are planning on doing that, and if we do, when it would be. You might have heard that we're also releasing a new role-playing game, Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
Yep.
Yeah, I've heard a little bit, yeah.
And that's sort of eating a fair amount of editorial capacity. We're aware some people want to do it. It turns out that the people that run Paizo are smart people and they like money. One of the things that Eric Mona, our publisher, said more than once is that his business plan is make things that people like and give it to them in exchange for money. I'm a big fan of the softback versions of the Pathfinder books, right? I love having those. They're lighter. And mostly, actually, I use PDFs for my references now because they have search functions, which is super useful. I can't say if we're going to do it or not. One of the things that Eric Mona has said is that as long as the pocket editions of first edition are selling, we'll keep making them. The fact that we think that over a decade of working with the game system, we've learned some things we can make better doesn't mean that we think first edition should be blacked out. So if people want to buy and play that, we again want to exchange things to them for money. I expect to see the pocket editions for as long as there's a demand for it on the Pathfinder side. And I would guess that Eric Mona has on his whiteboard on a list of things to consider pocket editions for Starfinder.
I've been trying to come up with an idea for a video series about running a high fantasy session of any RPG versus running like a sci-fi session for an RPG. Do you have any tips for GMs like transitioning from one to the other, say from Pathfinder to Starfinder, as far as like the world is concerned, or how they should treat their players or the resources their players have at their disposal?
One of the things I think that really is different between a sort of classic, especially a medieval style or Renaissance style fantasy game and science fiction or even modern games, is attitude and appropriateness of modern thought. If you're looking at the backgrounds from the playtest, for example, for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, we don't have as a background scroll blogger, right? We did not try and take some of these modern roles and create fantasy versions of them. Whereas I have run into a whole bunch of people who take the icon theme from Starfinder and said, well, I'm an icon because I do video series. Can I Google things? Is there Facebook? Think about those modern sensibilities. And even if we don't put it in a book, because we can't mention everything in the galaxy, you can sort of assume that if you're in a major city, there's going to be a movie theater and vending machines and mass transit. There might be one public transit for the hover bus and then a different one for the flying carpet, because those are two competing companies and they don't let you use each other's rest stops. I also think you want to talk to people a little bit about their expectation. One person wants to play a character based on Conan the Barbarian, and one wants to base one on King Arthur, and one wants to base one on Rand al'Thor from the Wheel of Time. All of them can see those other characters existing from somewhere in that fantasy world, even though those fantasy worlds are all very different. In a science fiction setting, if one person wants to play RoboCop, and one person wants to play Captain Kirk, and one person wants to play Luke Skywalker, those do not necessarily make sense together. You don't expect a wandering Jedi Knight who is the last of his order and answers to no one to be on the bridge of the Enterprise. You really need to help people know what to expect is the setup. Are we the Magnificent Seven in space? We're wandering from place to place as mercenaries. Are we going to do something like Serenity or Firefly, where we're the crew of a starship? Which is one of the reasons why we have sort of as a core expectation in Starfinder that you're going to have a starship, you'll have it together, and it will get better as you go along in levels, so that's an option. But we also make sure that that is an option that the GM can just cut out. People will have different expectations and make different characters depending on what you tell them to expect.
Actually, at the beginning of April, we're actually going to be starting a Dawn of Flame campaign run.
Yeah.
Krug is actually going to be GMing it.
Yeah.
After reading it 400 times, I'm assuming he's got some questions
I
for
do.
it.
Now that you've like worked me up that hard, the first question's super generic. But can you just talk a little bit about like the process of making one of those books? Like, do you come up with a story that you really want to tell and then build mechanics and like encounters around it, or do you go the other way around? A power curve that you need to fit a story around?
It's actually a fairly involved process. I want to specifically call out our Adventure Path developers, Jason Keeley and Chris Sims, who do an awesome job because they are at any given moment, they are having to write blogs and advertise the current Adventure Path, go through editing and copy fitting of the next one, be developing and assigning the one after that, thinking about the one after that, right? They're 2-3 ahead at any given moment. So they've got different storylines at different power levels that they have to be keeping track of at once. This all starts with us asking basic questions like, how long do we want this Adventure Path to be? We've done 6 adventure paths. We've done 3 adventure paths. Are we starting at first level? Because our second 3-level adventure path didn't start at first level. It started higher up. What level do we want to get to? Can we give you a story that makes sense within that scope? When we did Dead Suns, right, we're saying, okay, you're going to get from 1st to around 13th. You're starting with a minor issue on a space station, and you end up in the one I wrote, which is the 6th Dead Suns, in a very different sort of end of the trilogy climax kind of situation. So we talk about what scope we want, and then the developers on that line and the creative director will get together and say what stories interest us, right? Like for the Dawn of Flames, we have the sun, and we had said, hey, there's the Burning Archipelago, which is a city on the surface of the sun. And there are these temple space stations of Serenray that orbit the sun. So they got excited about those ideas. The developer will then say, well, here are the high points I want to hit. One to be about getting to the problem, and one's going to be sort of a side view of the problem, and the next one will be revealing who the real mastermind is, sort of big scope things. And then they will write a very basic outline, because frequently several of these are written at the same time by different people. So you need your base outline to say you have to start at point L and get to point O. The one before you is ending at L, and the one after you is starting at O, so you need to make that smooth transition. Frequently, that then goes to whoever the freelance writer is, and they're told, write a advanced outline that will break down what every encounter is, not a full write-up, but just like, we're going to have, you'll be attacked by space zombies, and that'll be CR5, and then after that, you're going to run into a space necromancer, and that'll be CR7. And then after that, we're going to have as many Cernox as we need for CR6. People can have similar ideas to match the theme, And you don't want the same encounter at different CRs showing up in adventure after adventure after adventure. And then each writer tackles it a little differently. I personally tend to try and write what I think of as the touchstone moments. Here's the first sub-boss. Here's where there's a big reveal. Here's the most difficult fight. Some people write from beginning to end no matter what. Some people hop around and they do, okay, here's the stat block for everything. And then here's the intro for everything. Once all that's done, regardless of their process, it gets sent back to Paizo, and our two developers, Chris and Jason, take it and go through it, make sure it makes sense, that the rules are appropriate, that the writing is clear, et cetera, and double check everything. If we're saying you're supposed to hit the wealth by level numbers that we list in the core rulebook, then we need to make sure that we have put in so much loot that even if you're selling some of it for 10% and you miss some of it because you didn't make a skill check, that ultimately at the end, you should still have useful stuff that adds up to wealth by level for the whole group. As a GM, it's easy because I can look at people's character sheets and say, how much money worth of stuff do you have? Oh, well, I got 10,000 credits. Oh, well, you're supposed to have 20,000 credits at this point. I better give you more stuff. We don't know where people are going to be, so we have sort of this decade of experience, best guess on what we do to get players as close as possible to that. And all the art comes in, and there's the layout process. That's all a little inside baseball to get into. But it's a multi-stage process, and it's all going on at different stages for different adventures and different adventure paths at the same time.
That sounds incredibly stressful. Like, especially one person working on multiple different adventures at the same time, I can't fathom not accidentally mixing them up a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, this happens, then this happens. No, wait, sorry, I'm thinking of the wrong thing. This happens, then this happens.
There is a reason that instead of becoming a adventure path developer, I decided to try my hand at design lead. It's a really specialized skill set, and I think we're very, very fortunate to have the people we have doing it.
Well, I promise we won't talk about adventure books much longer then. I do want to talk about the next adventure book. Overall, what are players and GMs going to be seeing in Attack of the Swarm?
We internally, for a while, joked that we were calling this Swarm Ship Troopers.
Love it.
I think that is about as much of a spoiler of what it's going to be like as I really, really want to get. There's a lot of cool narrative stuff there that we've only barely touched on up till now. Swarm are one of our core threats that we mentioned in the core rulebook. If we said in the core rulebook, these things are major threats that people are worried about, we probably need to do some adventures. Threats. You know, it forced the Veskarium and the Pack Worlds to have a tenuous peace, because otherwise they'd both be destroyed. And then no Starfinder player ever sees any member of the Swarm. That's going to seem weird to people. Now, we're still in early days, relatively speaking, with Starfinder, so we're going to be building up a mythology over time. It's time to give people things where they can yell, "Let's rock," flip on the full auto and their smart guns and go to it.
Exactly what we were hoping for.
That's awesome. Next, we're going to move on to Alien Archive. We have one question, and it's kind of like a fluffy question. With the 19 new playable races within Alien Archive, which one would you say is your favorite? The wackiest or weirdest, or something that you just love?
My favorite is the Noir, size medium albino tech-savvy Minotaur race. They are an Easter egg callback to something that I wrote in the Guide to Absalom in 2009, before there was even a Pathfinder role-playing game. I was able to convince James Sutter, who was our creative director at the time, that I should be allowed to take this one really thin thing that I mentioned there and that Organized Play has done great things with, and suggest that in the far future it's become this much more important, much more involved thing. And being allowed to do that is very rewarding as a creator. 10 years ago, I had this idea. People have done some cute stuff with it. Can we, without getting really explicit with it, can we take it and show that it has blossomed into something much more important? And the Noir is therefore my Easter egg, my who's paying attention hidden little thing. That's actually the only thing I wrote in the first Alien Archive. Like, the Guide to Absalom. Awesome. And then it's come up fairly often in Organized Play, Pathfinder Society.
I'm super looking forward to Alien Archive. I like the way that you guys are going about it. It's not just, here's a list of new monsters to kill, but we've got playable races, we've got weapons, we've got like stuff for both player and GM to enjoy this book.
We really appreciate hearing that feedback, because that was sort of a break from how Pathfinder did things. When we don't have a good reason to do something differently, Pathfinder's been very successful, so obviously there's a certain amount of momentum to want to do things the Pathfinder way. We thought there was going to be a lot of narrative stuff that people who are just excited about Starfinder in general were going to want in that book, and if players are picking up the book anyway, we want them to find stuff that excites them. That also lets us give GMs story hooks, right? If we say, hey, here is a set of gloves that you can make out of the hide of this electrical beast, and here are the stats for it, then the GM can say, oh, well, I don't have anything else to run tonight. You guys are hired by a company that makes these things to go kill 12 of these by a guy with an exclamation point over his head. Build the world in a broader and more interesting way by saying, you know, this is why this might matter to the players. And then it just makes sense to have the new player races in the same book where we've got NPCs of that race. That way we don't have to talk about it twice, right? You don't want to have to say, hey, here are dwarves that you can play. Oh, and here are dwarves that you can kill. And we have to describe them again all over in case you only have this one book.
It's not just the like shared resource amongst players and GMs, at least as far as I'm concerned, that makes me excited for this book. It's the sheer volume. Because I'm not used to like expansions releasing things with this kind of like, oh yeah, here's 19 new playable races. That's huge from my perspective. And it takes me from a place of like, should I buy this book to how do I not buy this book?
Yeah.
One of the things that we want in Starfinder is to suggest that you're in a galaxy that the original world of Golarion was in. Golarion had like 112 sapient sentient species on one planet. Now we're saying you're visiting dozens or hundreds of planets. So there ought to be a lot of different races out there. One of the touchstones for science fantasy is Star Wars. You have the cantina scene where you get 15 races just to order a drink.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I heard rumor, I'm not sure if you can confirm or not, that there's a sentient velociraptor race.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Okay.
The velociraptor race, but I can tell you that we sure could do one in the game system we've got.
No, I want to see a picture of it.
Well, and that's the other thing, right? We're big geek gamers that love an in-joke as much as anyone else. There are things that are in the Alien Archive because I thought, ooh, I want Paizo to pay a professional artist to draw this. Since they won't do that as just a favor, I'd better make game rules for it.
I love it. The biggest thing that has been going on for us at least is the playtest that you guys just did, which is for the character operations manual that you guys have coming out. What do you feel like one of the biggest things that you guys have learned? What do you feel is the most valuable that you got?
Picking one valuable thing is a little tricky. One of the things that was really, really important to us is that feedback we frequently got was these character classes are neat ideas. They feel like things that belong in Starfinder, and I want to play one. So we got that feedback even from people who were saying this is broken, or I don't think this makes sense, or this won't be interesting to play. But then they'd follow up to that by saying, but I wish it was interesting to play. Here are all the things that I think are wrong, but I like this idea. It is much easier if you've got a good, cool idea to figure out how to drill down and make that useful in a game than it is to have some dry recitation of numbers and game effects and make that interesting. We were literally prepared for people to say, biohackers are a stupid idea. There is nothing you could ever do that would make us like this class. Get rid of it and make another one. We didn't want to do that, but we had an emergency plan in place if that's what we had to do. And thankfully, we don't.
Yeah, and I will say out of the three, the Biohacker was definitely my favorite. Dawn of Flame campaign, I believe someone's planning on playing the Witch Warper.
Yes.
I think. So we're going to have to maybe switch rules with the character operations.
Abruptly, yeah.
But, you know, we'll find out.
Yeah, we'll make it work.
I also saw that you have some additional or changed ship rules. Can you talk at all about the new ship rules?
I can largely tell you that I cannot talk at all about the new ship rules. It's not a huge part of the book. This is not a Starship book. We have gotten a lot of feedback, and the game's been going on for a year and a half now. And so we've got a lot more idea of what kinds of characters people are building, what they want to be able to do with them, and how those characters interact with Starship rules. It was a design goal of ours that you do not have to make a character specialized for Starship combat in order to be able to contribute during Starship combat. We didn't want players to have to say, well, I'm going to be crappy in all the other things. And we didn't want that opportunity cost I was talking about. We wanted it to be built in or something useful for everything. I think we did a good job of setting up rules that did what we wanted, with hindsight being 2020 and with tens of thousands of people having played it instead of, I mean, no matter how much you playtest something, one day after you've released a book and sold out at Gen Con, people have played it more than your 5-person team could ever playtest it. There are things we would like to adjust, and Com seems like the place for introducing new classes, new options for existing classes, new race options. this seemed like the place if we wanted a new Starship option to put it, even though this is not primarily a Starship mode.
Character Operations is going to have a bunch of new gear. Now, are we looking at, I assume new weapons, new armor, but is this going to be new characteristics? Is this going to be just updates? Like,
how new is new?
It's not going to be a ton of new gear because we have the armory. The number one thing that we are doing in the equipment section for the character operation manuals is putting in rules for shields. We only had a very few option for shield-like things in the core rulebook. That was a conscious decision based on playtesting and feedback at the time. But as soon as we released it, it became very, very obvious that there was a group of people who really, really, really want a great big metal-plated riot shield with spotlights on front that they're carrying around with a pistol in back. In addition to the classes, we playtested a rough draft of shield rules. We got a lot of feedback on those too. Adding a whole new type of equipment to a game without breaking the game is a significant challenge. So we want to make sure that we've got all the room and space we need for shields to be introduced in an organic way that makes sense, so that characters who want shields see a benefit, but characters who do not want shields don't feel like they're being stupid.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering all of our really dumb and really poorly put together questions.
My questions were great. I don't know what you're talking about.
Everyone's questions were great, and it was a delight. I really appreciate y'all inviting me over.
I look forward to the new content. And again, thank you very much for joining us. Until next time, everyone. Bye.
Bye, folks.